In finance, trust isn't a brand promise, it's a responsibility. One misstep can erase decades of credibility. This episode's guest has spent more than 3 decades reckoning with this exact reality across global banking, entrepreneurship, and regulated leadership in the DIFC. Madhavan Sivashankar is the founder and CEO of Gulf International Finance Limited, a firm operating across the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. Built on long-term relationships, discipline, and strategic clarity. But beyond the boardroom, he is deeply invested into mentoring the next generation, from entrepreneurs to students discovering STEM for the very first time. Live not from Dubai, but from the luscious green coast of the city of Kochi, India, this is Madhavan. Madhavan, I want to start not with a business, but with a person behind it. You spent most of your career in highly regulated, high-stakes environments. Before the titles and leadership roles, how would you describe yourself in your early teenage and professional years?
I'm happy to be here, Jay, and I'm happy to contribute to your podcast. I think it all boils down to the attribute of discipline, which I inculcated very early in life. And believe it or not, my first choice for a career was to join the military.
Wow.
So I actually did apply, and unfortunately, because of a medical issue, which is flat feet, I did not get selected. I was greatly disappointed. But the attribute of discipline remained with me, and that helped me to cope up with, being part of a regulated environment and in a structure where the scope of errors are limited. So right from my childhood, I've had this attribute. So it kind of helped. Yeah.
Do you feel that initial rejection of you not being allowed to go into the army actually became a great tool for you going into business and that professional career?
I think if I circle back and there's an irony in that whole experience. I was all of 15 years old. It was a matter of great disappointment because I come from a military family, and it's very disappointing that I was not selected. But the irony is that I actually got treatment for my foot, and the foot actually got to a stage where it would be approved. But at that point, which is about a year and a half later, I lost interest.
Oh, wow.
And I started getting more attracted towards numbers. And I suppose that led to a path of moving to the world of finance. And after that, I haven't looked back.
Wow. Yeah. And well, I guess you've just answered my next question, what was drawing you to finance and banking, but was there any other concepts of going through school or stuff? You were always kind of attracted to maths and the numbers and the, different concepts and stuff behind that?
So that's a great question. So I was always attracted to numbers. And, I realized very quickly when I started comparing myself to my peer community that I had the ability to roll things in my mind. What my peers would do on a calculator, I would have already got the answer. So it was a natural attraction for me. But I think the more important aspect is at that time, we are talking about pre-crisis. I don't know how many of your viewers know about the 2008 Lehman crisis. It was pre-crisis, and banking and finance was extremely glamorous. And I got campus placed with my first employer, which was a large American bank. And I think there were maybe about 300 or 350 applicants, and they selected 2, and I was one of them. So there was a clamor to go after the glamour,
Yeah.
So I think that kind of also seduced a lot of students to aspire for a finance career, but there were only that many jobs available, and a lot of people used to apply. So I think my first big win in life was to be campus recruited by Citicorp.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you begin your finance career in the early 90s in India. What did that environment teach you about ambition and that discipline that you've already spoken to that you had in your later adolescent years?
So India is a very difficult place to succeed in corporate life. And what I mean by that is just the sheer population, and a lot of that population are extremely intelligent. So the competition that one would face in, let's say, a country like India is a lot higher than it would be with other countries where there's a lower population and hence a lesser number of applicants. So there is always a rush for the good jobs. And I think, starting a career in India, especially with a bank like Citicorp, I think the saying was that it is an organization that quickly transforms boys to men. So Citibank does that to you. They throw you at the deep end of the pool and expect you to swim. But I'm grateful because my early years were difficult, but it, gave me, I suppose, aspects and a lot of experience in how to tackle the challenges that were yet to come.
So those toughness of the first few years in Citicorp and those beyond, you obviously then went into some more leadership roles. Do you think that played a large contribution into being able to go and excel in those kind of roles going into the late 90s, early 2000s for yourself?
Yeah, so in correlation with my earlier answer, the pyramid structure is quite prevalent in India, and even to get to the base of the pyramid is difficult. So to climb the ladder is even more difficult because there's a lot of competition. But I think that early grounding at Citicorp was certainly helpful. And then, of course, I spent most of my working life. When I say working, I've always broken up my life into my working life and my entrepreneurial life. So I'm talking about pre-2014 and post-2014. But pre-2014, my working life was mainly spent with large international foreign banks, the likes of Citicorp, ABN AMRO, which is a Dutch bank, and American Express, which is again an American bank. But I think it prepared me well for the leadership roles that I would ultimately achieve in the jobs to come in the future. So yes.
And what type of leader, at one stage did you want to become? And then on the flip side of that, did you feel you had become? And what kind of exuberance did you try and bring to the workplace and the teams you were working with?
I think, again, if we are talking about the early years in India, and if I have to break up the leadership aspect into, let's say, two broad verticals. One was, and what I'm about to tell you is not written in any book, it comes from hard experience. One is how well you manipulate the organization, right? So there is the so-called politics of organizations, and as you grow and start climbing the ladder, you're exposed to it more and more, right? So that aspect was there, which I wasn't honestly very good at. So the other aspect was where, as an individual, you exhibit, empathy and exhibit a willingness to work with a team, which I've always had quite, it's been quite pronounced in my personality. And I think that helped. And I think like-minded leaders noticed that attribute and gave me opportunities to grow. And from, a junior analyst in 1992, I suppose, within about 8 years, I was a regional director. So it was a fairly good climb. And I think those aspects that I'd inculcated in my early years did help me to succeed.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating, the story of how you've climbed the corporate ladder. What roles inside these institutions like Credit Suisse and others that you've worked inside of teach you about risk that maybe most entrepreneurs or early founders don't fully appreciate?
I think the mistake that most early founders do, and there are quite a few mistakes that early founders make, and I think the key mistake is, one is you have to choose the right partners. Because discord and conflict between partners kill good businesses. So that's something that you need to be careful of. And I suppose if I have to correlate that to my working life, it's as good as working with a peer on a project. And if you're with the wrong peer, you can be sure that project won't succeed, right? So that learning was already there in me. I think the second big pitfall that founders need to be careful of is how to manage their costs. Because I think there is a tendency when you move from corporate life to entrepreneurial life to keep living the corporate life, and that is, a recipe for disaster. So you have to come down to the ground and understand the cost dynamics of how you build a business, and be very, very careful where you spend every dollar that you have, because there is always a paucity of capital till you're established, right? So I think that's the second key thing that founders tend to have problems with, which is the cost aspect. The third aspect is, I think you need to choose your topic well. The days of generalists are over, and I think the days of specialists have come in. So to just say that, I want to be a corporate banker, or I want to be a private banker, or be an institutional banker, or have businesses around that is not good enough. You need to, what we call peel the onion and get down to the seed. Because I think it's the people who create a niche for themselves who ultimately succeed. So I would think so choose your topics very carefully. And ultimately, I think founders need to have a purpose. If you are a Me Too guy, oh, he's done it, and Jay has done it, and Ruben has done it, and they're all successful, I'm going to do it. It will not work, because you need to have that purpose, and I think that purpose has to come from within. Let's not kid ourselves. The investor community that you meet, the regulatory community that you interact with, your peers, and generally the world outside are very, very smart people. So they will size you up very quickly in terms of, what is the purpose that drives this guy? And if that purpose is clear, it's unequivocal and implemented, I think that is a recipe for success. So I would think these four are the ingredients that founders need to watch out for and work on.
Joanna, thank you, because lessons like that only come with decades and decades of experience. That's really valuable. And you speak about the two professional lives that you've lived pre and post 2014. So I just want to delve into kind of that period then. What was the specific moment and the overarching feeling for yourself that led you from diverting from climbing the corporate ladder to starting your own business and working around the financial systems that you're going to forge on your own?
A wise man once told me, it's time to bid goodbye to the world of addition and to enter the world of multiplication. And I think that is a key criteria that should drive you to move from being an employee to an employer, right? I think that was well ingrained in my mind. So I used to always think addition and multiplication. However, the challenge to that is that human beings generally are creatures of habit, and you get so used to that month-end check, which is your salary, which people feel that they will find it difficult to live without it. And there's a sense of security that builds around it. And I think it's these entrepreneurs, and in many ways they are risk takers, who are willing to forego that monthly compensation to thrive and get into the world of multiplication as an entrepreneur. I think the other key difference between the two is I referred to the two ingredients of succeeding in corporate life. I think at one point in time, that first ingredient that I talked about, which is the politics of corporate life, I just had enough of it. I was a silent spectator, never a participant. And I think I was a bit fortunate because I wasn't so impacted as many other people were for whatever reason. But I think as a spectator, they reached a point where I couldn't take it anymore. So, always looking behind your back and trying to manage your boss and, all those things. I think I just had enough of it. So I wanted to take the risk. I wanted to take the plunge. I was, I think, at the right age at that time because I'd amassed enough experience, built a network that respected me, and I felt this is the time, and hence I went ahead and took the plunge. And if you ask me today, it's been 12 years, whether I have any regrets? Absolutely not. So I'm so glad that I took that decision. The only regret I possibly have is I could have done it a bit earlier.
Yeah, and I think that's a struggle that a lot of people have is taking that leap and making that first step. As it is usually the hardest. And from what I believe, you started and founded that business in the UAE and the GCC region. Now, obviously, that's the intersection of all global capital investment, or primarily speaking. What was it like trying to find a niche in such a competitive market? Or maybe was the market very different back then as it is to now? Because that's what it seems like now.
I think in another interview many years ago, somebody asked me this question, and I still recall the answer that I gave that individual, was that my question, people ask me, why GCC? Why don't you set up in London or in Liechtenstein or Mumbai? They're much bigger markets. And you're right, the GCC and the UAE specifically was not what it is today, right? But my question was, why not? I think it affords you a great lifestyle. It's got an incredible airline network. It's got rich neighbors. Saudi Arabia was known for its wealth and disposable income even back then. So my question was, why not? I was one of the early people to set the trend of people from corporate life, especially in the early 40s, moving into entrepreneurship. I was probably maybe in the first 5 or something like that, perhaps, I'm not sure. But at that time, it was almost considered as blasphemy. How can you leave Credit Suisse and, start something on your own? But I think I was quite bullish about setting up in Dubai to start with in the first instance. And now, of course, we've got businesses outside as well. But I think that paid dividends because I think that was my belief in my assumptions. I think paid off. So no regrets.
What do you think were the hardest parts to get right within the first 24 months, 36 months of you stepping out?
I don't think there were hardest parts. I think the whole experience was entirely very, very difficult because I made many, many mistakes. And I think, they say that everybody makes mistakes and fools repeat them. So I wasn't afraid of making mistakes. I was afraid of repeating them. So when I made a mistake, I would sit myself down, write it down, and say, in this lifetime, I'm never going to make this mistake again. But I think the typical mistakes, I mean, I could go on and on, but I think the typical mistakes that happen are an improper business plan, which, right from day one is doomed to fail. So to get that business plan correct, I think the second is, the entire hiring process, because there are many candidates and different types of talent that's available. They may be very good in what they do, but they may not be good for you. And I think it takes some amount of maturity and experience to understand that. I made mistakes. I sometimes hired the wrong people. But I just made sure that I don't repeat them. And I think the first 24 months was incredibly difficult. I had 2 young daughters. My wife was also struggling with her own initiatives. Our disposable income was limited. We were burning capital to survive. But, I stayed afloat, and I think as time passes and you start settling down and you learn from your mistakes, I think success is around the corner.
Mm.
Yeah.
What early decision or structure that you implemented in your main business, Gulf International Finance Limited, shaped its trajectory more so than you would have thought maybe at the time?
I think the one thing that we did well is we branded and built a structure as a one-stop shop, which was quite unique at that point in time because both individuals and institutions knew that this is one place where we can have competent discussions and potentially get value. It's ultimately, Jay, everything is about getting value, right? If somebody gets value from you, they will never stop being associated with you. But it also works to the contrary. If you're not able to add value, then that relationship is lost. So I think because we were a one-stop shop and hence we were active in investment banking advisory transactions like M&A, both on the buy side and the sell side, on the corporate banking advisory transactions like raising debt capital, rating advisories, working with the rating agencies and getting institutions rated. On the individual perspective, which is on the private banking advisory side, where typically we would offer open architecture to high net worth individuals to make investments and get returns thereon. I think that clearly helped us and set us as a different entity vis-a-vis our competition. Because our competition, it's not that they did not try it, but they could not sustain it. So they had to stick to one of those areas of expertise. But I think we, over the last 12 years of our existence, we have stayed with it.
And the industry that you went to obviously is probably, one of the most daunting and overwhelming. And in financial services, trust is everything.
Yes.
How did you deliberately try and build that trust rather than just hoping it emerges?
Yeah, so that's another great question because I think, trust is the basic fundamental of a financial services business, especially post-Lehman. Because what happened post-Lehman, and you were probably too young to remember, but what happened post-Lehman is the faith that people all over the world had on the financial services community had greatly diminished. It was rock bottom. So if I must confess, I would be embarrassed to introduce myself as a banker in my community, especially in 2008, 9 and 10. And, it all boiled down to trust. And, when you say trust, the thing with financial services is it's not just two parties. So it's not trust between your clients and you. That's just one aspect of it. So your clients and you is one relationship. Then comes your service providers, which are the banks that you work with and the funds that you work with, the AMCs that you work with. That is a separate relationship altogether. And the third, last but certainly not the least, is the trust the regulators have on you. Because regulation and compliance became so important post 2008 that if regulators did not trust you, that was the end of the road, because they started getting very severe on people who wouldn't toe the line and who wouldn't go by the rule book. So trust became the genesis of survival, so to speak, because you had to inculcate trust and in an intense manner to manage your relationship with these three distinct communities: your clients, your service providers, which are your banks, and the other the funds and AMCs, and also the regulators. I think that was important too.
I've heard the term used a lot, but what does long-term value creation mean in a business such as your own, GIFL?
Yeah, so I think there are essentially two kinds of client relationships that one can form with a financial services business. I call them transactional and relationship oriented. So transactional is you have one transaction that you do with a client, boom, you're out. And you'll never see that client again. But I think those kind of relationships are something that A, we have not done a lot, and B, we aren't looking for them. I think the second category is the relationship set of clients, where not only you have repeat transactions of a similar nature, but you also have the ability to cross-sell. So a good example could be that you're dealing with an institution and you raise capital for them, and your private wealth advisory team then gets an introduction to them and manages the wealth of the owners. They're completely different transactions, but you get a chance to deepen the loyalty and cross-sell. So I think that aspect is really important.
And yeah, as you're trying to grow this relationship and expand your clientele, and as you're trying to innovate, but yet stick within this narrow corridor of compliance and all the guidelines that you're working within, how do you approach that without slowing the organization down too much?
I think the good part is that it all boils down to educating clients in the first instance. I think there is a tendency of certain professionals to not give the full picture, and that's when remorse sets in at a later stage. But I think in the first instance, if you educate your investors or your client relationships that this is the parameters under which we work, clients acclimatize. So when clients acclimatize, the whole process then forms a certain rhythm. And whilst it may take more time than a slam dunk, it certainly does not slow or diminish the progress of the company, because I think the relationships do grow in the long run. So, I mean, just to sum it up, I think you need to have full disclosure with your clients in the first instance, which includes timelines, which includes performance, which includes the chance of success or the chance of failure, right in the first instance, and keep reinforcing them. Because clients also read and they understand that there is a new environment and these guys, they're just following the rules. So let's flow with that.
And I want to shift to a different part where, much to how you've been glad enough to give us your time now, you give a lot of your time into mentoring, from EO to STEM education. What responsibility and teachings through experience that you've already spoken to do you feel leaders can provide beyond that of their own businesses?
I think your path to leadership is incomplete without giving back. I mean, that's my view. So I'm 55 years old today. And I believe I've reached that stage in life where I've amassed adequate experience to give back. And so, I gladly invested in an education business several years ago. And, we have maybe 200-300 kids in Dubai, and we're disseminating and teaching them topics around science, including a laboratory environment. Aside of that, I'm also a part of the advisory committee to the University of Bath, where I mentor students for their School of Entrepreneurship, and I've successfully mentored a student. It requires effort because you're committing to a few hours a month. You have a timetable, you have an agenda, you're tracking that agenda, you're making sure that that young student gets the right, the right approach in terms of conditioning his or her mind, how to approach entrepreneurship. And then, of course, you're constantly either receiving counsel or giving counsel, business-related counsel and opinions to other members of the community. Now, it could be within the entrepreneur's organization, or it could be within your peer community, it could be within your social circle, But that constant give and take, I think, is important. And as you mature in life and, you're 30 years plus in terms of experience, I think slowly the giving back starts, ascending, and the taking starts reducing because you've reached that stage of life. So I suppose that journey is ongoing as well.
Well, it's really inspiring to hear that people like yourself are happy to give back in such a way, and that fills a void for you and making you feel so much more complete across your professional experience to then be able to give back. But how has working with students and early staged entrepreneurs actually sharpened your own thinking, and maybe you've been able to take that back into your business?
Yeah, so I think, the good part that I find about mentoring students is they often come up with ideas which I don't, which I think is incredible because I suppose, and even my own children, of course, both my children are soon to be doctors, so they chose the medical profession over finance. But having said that, I think, sometimes I, get thoughts and ideas during this mentorship process, which I haven't thought about. And that's Gen Z for you, and that's where the ideas are actually being curated in those brains, right? And you need to tap those brains. But I think more importantly, that's not the driving factor. I think the driving factor is that, like I said, I think your path to leadership and your path to success. And Jay, beyond a certain stage in life, it's not about money. Money is a key driver up to a certain stage, but beyond that stage, I think it's all about completing your journey, and you cannot complete your journey successfully till you have started this process of giving back. So it's something that I enjoy doing. It's something I take responsibility for. It requires discipline. But I have inculcated that into my character.
Yeah, well, it's amazing to hear the different lenses that you can go through as you go through that pathway and how you've built that. I do just want to go back to your business in Gulf International Finance Limited for just a second. What role does a complex decision enforce you to go back to a framework or a question that you kind of had that backbones the way your company moves forward?
Now, I'm going to answer that question in two parts, or rather, I'm going to, react to it in two ways. I think when you're faced with complex issues and complex issues and complex problems and complexities are part of life. With entrepreneurs or in an entrepreneurial journey, it's multiplied by 10, right? But I think the most important thing is not to be hasty and not to be impulsive. And always don't be shy of seeking counsel. And when I said that there are two parts of this in terms of periods of time, we're talking about pre-AI and post-AI. So pre-AI is, my advice to young founders and young entrepreneurs would be that form a board. Often it might seem ridiculous. Oh, I have a $500,000 business or a $1 million business. Why do I need a board? You need a board, right? Because that board is there for a reason. And one of the reasons to have a board is to navigate the firm through complexities. So it's important to have experienced people sitting on your board because they will give you a viewpoint which you've often missed, right? Post AI, I'm not saying that you need to give up your board. You still have the board, but post AI, an aggregator of sorts in terms of approaching complexities. If today we have paid subscriptions to several AI agents, but if I discuss a complex issue with, let's say, OpenAI, Anthropic, Grok, and one or two Perplexity, etc., and I aggregate the results I get from them, it's incredible. And more often than not, it is the best way forward. So I think don't be shy of seeking counsel from your board. Set up your board. Make sure the governance structure is adequate. and don't be shy from adopting AI into your daily lives. It should not drive you, but it should support you, right? So I think that is the way that I look at, resolving complex situations.
Well, that probably leads me on well. Because what kind of role and value do you still put in intuition and HR post, AI becoming this huge thing and everyone rushing in the doors to integrate it wherever absolutely they can?
Yeah, so I think the impact that AI is going to have on certain functions is going to be quite acute, unfortunately. That's my view. Now, if we break it up into functions, I think certainly some of the process-oriented backroom functions will be threatened. And I have no doubt in my mind. And I think we are just scratching the surface. I think there is going to be a reality, and it's going to be ugly for some in the years to come. But I think it can never replace intuition. The reason being that artificial intelligence is a summation of empirical data, of things that have happened. So it summates it, it simplifies it, breaks it down, puts it step by step, and then gives you a course of action. It can never replace intuition, because intuition is what creates unicorns. AI can never create a unicorn. Never. It is the person behind it and his or her intuition that will create a unicorn. So I think intuition is irreplaceable, at least for the time being. And I think that is the privilege of man. But I think there are going to be some process-oriented backroom jobs which will be impacted.
And in that, and for people like yourself who are in financial leadership roles, how do you see that evolving in such a time of rapid technology change and geopolitical complexity?
I think it's evolving rapidly. I find that there are two sets of people in the industry that I know. One who are extremely traditional, who don't trust artificial intelligence, who feel fear to inculcate that into their way of working and into their, into their journey. And I think they are going to regret it because I think that does need to be inculcated. As far as the, the downsides are quite evident. I think the upsides from a business owner's perspective, I think are quite exciting actually, because I think the number of hours that you would spend on tackling an issue or tackling an initiative, once your intuition has kicked in and put you on a journey, has more than halved, because you have artificial intelligence to help you take up your pace. So you're running at 20 kilometers an hour. Now AI comes in, boom, you're running at 100 kilometers an hour. So from that perspective, I think it's positive. But as I mentioned, that there is a negative aspect to it, which is that it would ultimately lead to impacting several functions, and there would be job losses. And I think the new generation needs to keep that in the back of their mind before they embark on a career. Because if you embark on a career that is, fortunately, with doom and gloom, then, you will regret it 20, 30 years later. I mean, at one time, Kodak, as I recall, was amongst the top 50 companies in the world till, Apple came in and they started in, they were supposed to be a mobile phone. And Kodak never realized that they're going to put in millions and billions of dollars in getting their camera to be better than Kodak. And as a result, it impacted Kodak. So I think that is something that, we should use those examples of technology advancement to make sure that, it holds us in good stead rather than catching us unawares.
I just want to take a scope out
Yep.
outside of your entrepreneurial leadership and your mentorship. What does Madhavan do? What are your hobbies and interests outside of the work and mentorship life?
I'm just trying to frame this properly. I want to be a good golfer, yeah, but I'm not. But I can hit the ball and I can hit it long, which is a good place to start. I think I try and get on the course as much as I can, which is something that I like to do. I love animals. At one time we had 8, and now we have 4. But I spent a lot of time with my pets. I really love them. It's a great unwind for me. And of course, I like to exchange ideas with my kids, because I find in many ways I'm reliving my youth when I hear them tell me stories. But I think the most important thing that's happened of recent times is I took a conscious decision for certain compelling reasons, not medical but more spiritual, to stop drinking alcohol. And I completely gave it up. It's been 6 months now. I love it. And so now fitness has been included in my regime. So I do spend 90 minutes of my waking hours in the gym, which has made me feel more complete. I think it's family, friends, sport. That's what keeps me occupied. And yes, and most importantly, I love to read. My method of reading has changed. So earlier I would read page to page, right from the first word to the last word. But I'm finding it difficult to do that because I'm not able to give that much time. But what I do is I blink it, and I make sure that topics of interest to me, either I blink it or I YouTube it, and I understand it well. And I spend, maybe an hour or 2 a day in trying to gain knowledge available in public domain on areas that interest me. So those are the things that keep me occupied. And
And I must just include, before we wrap things up, someone else mentioned to me another one of the many things that you spend your time doing. You've recently, I believe, started acquiring large ships and flipping them over in I'm not sure the period of time. Maybe you could help me understand that. So can you just talk to me and the audience about that?
So, life can be, as I say, it can be either a single path, or it can be a bumpy road. And the problem with entrepreneurs is that it's the bumps that keep them excited. I had no clue about shipping whatsoever until about a year and a half ago. But owing to certain circumstances, I got exposed to it. It was a topic that became interesting to me. And we decided that why don't we get into this business? And since then we've created a sort of a fund structure which actually acquires ships. And when I say acquires, for the avoidance of doubt, I mean that we are on the cap table of the SPV that owns the ship. And it's purely as an equity participant. And it's extremely exciting because shipping is not for the weak-hearted. You need to be a lionheart, and you need to understand and be on top of your game, especially when you're dealing. So we essentially deal with very large, very high-value ships. And these ships are not recreational, they are commercial, of course, and they transport, oil and gas and commodities and so on and so forth. And, there are compliance issues around it, the cost being high, the initial capital being high, the chance of failure is likely. And many entrepreneurs in the shipping business get wiped out because, a deal goes bad. So I think I had the choice of saying no to it, but that's how entrepreneurs are. And I said yes. And today we are in that business. It's still a new business for us, so we are treading carefully, but our intention is to scale it up. And I'm hoping that, over the next 4 or 5 years, that we would be proud owners of double digits in terms of vessels. And it's something that is now keeping me fully occupied. We're trying to do it under a regulatory framework so that, it stands the test of time. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Madhavan, and taking us into the mind of an entrepreneur who, after decades, tries to navigate into different niches and stuff and keep themselves interested and excited by what they're doing day in, day out. I think that's really important. But I think in an overarching sense, what comes through in this conversation is that leadership, especially in a overwhelming and competitive environment, isn't about speed or certainty, but about judgment, discipline, and trusting your own intuition.
Always.
Madhavan, your journey of trust can only obviously be built slowly. Decisions compound from that, and responsibility only grows as you do. So for anyone listening, building a business, a team, or making hard calls, I feel the question worth leaving to the conversation, sitting with is, are the decisions you're making today the ones you'll stand by 10 years from now? And I think your point on AI and innovation in that sense sits perfectly to that. So thank you so much for your time, Madhavan.
Thank you, Jay. And what I've tried to do today, this afternoon, is not keep it high level and try to give concrete examples for everything that I said. Because I think generally what happens is when it comes to experience shares, the topics that are discussed are very high level and very good to hear, but very difficult to implement. But what I try to do this afternoon is to try and break it down into, stuff that even young founders can pick up and implement, and which would help them in their journey. And if your viewers have learned even one new thing from this interview, I think it's, mission achieved.
Oh, well, yeah. I think everyone, including myself for sure, has learned easily more than one. And I thank you so much, because as you're right, and I still see all too many times now people talking about way too complex terms, but what you did so well is really make it nice and accessible to anyone, right from a 14, 15-year-old to a 60, 65, 70-year-old who's maybe never been into the financial services business, but curious to the insights. So thank you so much.
Thank you.